Nobody wins a stoplight pole with horsepower. They win it with torque. Horsepower is the number the manufacturers put on the brochure. It's what gets magazines excited and makes grown men argue in parking lots. But at the moment the light goes green, when the tires break loose, the hood rises, and your back gets pinned to the seat, that's torque doing the work. Rotational force, twisting power at the crank. And here's what the collector car market hasn't figured out yet. You can buy that sensation for $34 per foot-pound of torque if you know where to look. Meanwhile, guys are paying $180 per foot-pound for the prestige car. Same stoplight, very different math. You already know the big names: the Chevelle SS454, the Plymouth Hemi Cuda, the LS6. And yes, those are legitimate machines with legitimate numbers, but they're also expensive machines. And the question nobody's asking in 2026 is this: how much are you actually paying for each foot-pound of torque? Because when you run that math, some of the most celebrated muscle cars on the planet start looking like the worst deal on the road, and a handful of overlooked iron looks like genius. Today, we're building the Stoplight Leaderboard. 5 cars, 5 price points, 5 torque figures, and one metric that changes everything: the cost per foot-pound framework. Let's establish the baseline. The Chevelle SS454, specifically the LS6 variant, produced 500 foot-pounds of torque from the factory in 1970. That is a real number, and it is genuinely impressive. But a numbers-matching LS6 Chevelle in 2026 collector condition is going to run you somewhere in the neighborhood of $90,000 on the low end, and well past that for the right car. Do the math: $90,000 divided by 500 foot-pounds. You're paying $180 per foot-pound of torque. Now, if you're a collector chasing documentation, matching numbers, and auction stage provenance, that's a different conversation. But if what you want is the experience, the chest compression launch, the rear squat, the tire smoke stoplight exit, then you're overpaying by a factor of 5 or more. The golden ratio we're working with today is $32 to $40 per foot-pound of torque. That is the strike zone. That is where you get maximum mechanical violence per dollar in the 2026 market. 5 cars hit that window, or come close enough that the value case still destroys the prestige alternatives. Let's go through each one. The meat, the 5 cars. Car 1, 1971 Chrysler Newport Custom with the 440 TNT. The Newport Custom is what happens when Chrysler stuffs one of the most torque-dense engines ever built into a full-size land barge and prices it like an appliance. The 440 TNT, that's the 440 cubic inch big block in its 2-barrel street tune, delivered 480 foot-pounds of torque. Not horsepower, foot-pounds. In 2026, a solid driver-quality Newport Custom is sitting around $16,500. Run the math: $16,500 divided by 480 foot-pounds. You're at $34.37 per foot-pound. That is the bulk buy efficiency winner on this entire list. Yes, the car weighs somewhere around 4,400 pounds. Yes, it corners like a houseboat, but you didn't buy a Newport to carve canyons. You bought it because 480 foot-pounds of low-end grunt at the stoplight will move 4,400 pounds with authority, and it will do it every single time. This is the torque arbitrage nobody talks about because nobody considers the Newport a performance car. That's the opportunity.
Car 2, 1972 Buick GS455. Now we move up the prestige ladder slightly. The 1972 Buick GS Stage 1, even in net-rated SAE form after the emission shift, was still producing 510 foot-pounds of torque. 510. That is the highest torque output of any A-body platform car ever offered by General Motors. The compression came down with the net ratings, the horsepower figure dropped on paper, but Buick's engineers couldn't legislate away the displacement or the long stroke architecture. The foot-pounds stayed. Current market on a solid 1972 GS455 is running approximately $33,500. That puts you at $65.68 per foot-pound. That's twice the Newport's ratio. But the GS455 is also twice the car in terms of driving experience, fit and finish, and collector recognition. The Buick is still a devastating bargain against an LS6 Chevelle. You're getting 510 foot-pounds, more torque, for roughly one-third of the price per unit. The launch off the line in a GS455 is violent in a way that still surprises people who've driven everything. Car 3. 1971 Pontiac Grand Prix SJ455. Here's the one that gets overlooked almost every time. The Grand Prix SJ came with Pontiac's 455 cubic inch engine, the same rotational mass, the same bore and stroke architecture, the same 480 foot-pounds of torque you'd find in the GTO of the same era. But because the Grand Prix wears a personal luxury coupe body with the softer suspension tune and the formal roofline, the market has been sleeping on it. In 2026, a clean Grand Prix SJ is sitting around $28,000, $58.33 per foot-pound. That is the same engine producing the same torque as a GTO, a car that commands a serious premium for a fraction of the per-unit cost. The suspension is softer, yes, but the 455 doesn't care what bodywork is bolted around it. The torque output is the same. The stoplight launch is the same. Car 4. 1968 Ford Torino GT with the 390 FE. Now we cross the aisle to Ford, and this is where the engineering story gets genuinely interesting. The 390 FE, Fairlane engine for those keeping score, was not originally designed as a performance automobile engine. Ford developed the FE family in the late 1950s as heavy-duty truck and industrial power plant. It was engineered from the ground up to produce maximum foot-pounds of torque at the lowest possible RPM. That was the design brief. What that means in practice is a 427 foot-pound torque peak that arrives early and stays long. It doesn't need to rev, it just pulls. In a 1968 Torino GT with that engine is sitting in a mid-size fastback body with decent weight distribution and period-correct suspension geometry. Current market, approximately $24,500. That's $57.37 per foot-pound. That's the working man's torque, industrial strength, surprisingly quick, and criminally undervalued compared to its Mustang counterpart wearing the same engine. Car 5. 1969 AMX 390. This one breaks the cost rules, and it still makes the list. The AMX 390 is a two-seat muscle car, one of the only two-seaters in American production muscle history that wasn't a Corvette. And in 1969, with the 390 cubic inch engine, it produced 430 foot-pounds of torque in a car that weighed approximately 3,000 pounds. In 2026, clean AMX 390s are running around $42,000. That's $97.67 per foot-pound, the worst ratio on this list. But the perceived torque, the felt experience of 430 foot-pounds pushing 3,000 pounds, that is the most visceral machine here. This is the one where your brain tells you the laws of physics are being temporarily suspended. The AMX doesn't win the cost per foot-pound leaderboard. It wins the sensation per foot-pound contest with everything else part.
Proof. These aren't spec sheet guesses. The 440 TNT's torque curve was documented extensively in Chrysler engineering reports and confirmed in period motor trend and car life testing. The Buick 455's 510 foot-pound figure survived the net rating transition precisely because Buick's engineers had overbuilt the torque architecture of that engine from the beginning. The Pontiac 455's cross-platform application is documented in factory RPO records. The same long block was deployed across the GTO, the Grand Prix, the Bonneville, and the Firebird formula. The engine does not change based on the sheet metal around it. The FE family's truck origins are a matter of Ford engineering record. The 390 FE entered production in 1961, powering F-Series trucks and Ecoline cargo vans before it ever saw the inside of a performance car. That low RPM torque delivery was a feature, not an accident, and it translates directly to stoplight street behavior. The AMX weight figures come from AMC factory documentation. The base curb weight of a 1969 AMX with the 390 engine is in the 3,100 pound range, approximately 1,000 to 1,400 pounds lighter than its domestic competitors. Here's the number that should bother every LS6 Chevelle owner in the audience. The Newport Custom costs $16,500, produces 480 foot-pounds of torque, and delivers a stoplight launch that feels every bit as violent as a Chevelle that costs $90,000. For the first 60 feet, the asphalt doesn't care about your $70,000 price gap. It only cares about that 480 foot-pounds of Chrysler iron. That's not an insult to the Chevelle. That's just arithmetic. Why it matters. The muscle car market has been selling prestige for 30 years. The Hemi numbers, the LS6 documentation, the matching VINs, all of that is real, and all of that has value in the collector world. Nobody's arguing that. But there's a parallel market that exists for people who want to drive the cars, who want the experience of big block American torque without financing a house to get there. And that market is full of opportunities that the prestige auction circuit has been systematically ignoring. The Newport Custom, the GS455, the Grand Prix SJ, these are not consolation prizes. These are fully developed factory-engineered machines with legitimate mechanical credentials. The reason they're cheap is brand hierarchy and collector fashion, not mechanical inferiority. In 2026, the $32 to $40 per foot-pound strike zone represents the best available value in American muscle. The cars are sorted, the prices haven't fully caught up to the torque they represent, and the driving experience is completely authentic. The stoplight doesn't know what the car cost, it only knows what happened when the light went green. 5 cars, 5 price points, 1 metric that reframes the entire market. The $34 Newport, the $65 Buick, the $58 Pontiac, the $57 Torino, the $97 AMX that earns every dollar in feel. Stay tuned, we are not even close to being done with this.